Hi there, I'm Sarah Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know direct from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning, while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day where you say, I do. After photographing for the past 18 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point, with a fresh, honest take about the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So, you got the ring, you picked the date, and now it's time to find your vendors. You answered the question if you want a videographer, but do you know how to hire a professional videographer who is going to provide you with the personal film and experience and the product that is right for you? Do you know the questions to ask, what to look for, and how to hire that perfect videographer? I am here with Crystal from Annear Wedding Films. She is going to give us the secrets and the tips on how to hire the perfect videographer for your day. But more importantly, she's going to talk with us about how to get that personalized experience and the end product film that you are looking for. So with that said, please sit back and relax and enjoy my conversation with Crystal as we break down how to find the perfect videographer for you. Well, hello, Crystal. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. It's always fun for me to have a guest on the show that I work hand in hand with. So videography is definitely one of those topics that as a photographer, I basically work hand in hand with you. We kind of do this, well, no, let's back up. We don't do the same thing, but we chase after the same product.
Oh, definitely.
So, Crystal, for the people that don't know you, let's start with who you are, who you serve, and what you do in your business.
My name's Crystal. I'm the owner of Annear Wedding Films. I've been producing weddings now for about 11 years. I actually started right after I graduated from New England Tech for video and audio production. I worked for a few different companies and eventually started my own business.
And then now here you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Producing wedding films.
Right.
So, Crystal, I know that when we first spoke, we were wondering what is going to be the takeaway for this show. And there was a gazillion things that we could talk about because being a videographer and a photographer, we really work side by side together and a lot of our needs are the same and we're chasing after the same product. But I think we kept coming back down to why it's so important to hire a videographer that fits your needs and is a trustworthy videographer. So with that said, I was hoping that maybe we can step right into it with our listeners and kind of just help our listeners understand and how to find the best videographer for them. So there's a gazillion videographers out there with all different styles, but where does one even start to try to find a videographer that's right for them?
So I think a lot of couples, what they tend to do when they're looking for a videographer is just to go on Instagram, look at things that are trending, and find companies from all over and see what they like. But what I think that they should do is go to their vendors that they've hired already, ask their venue, ask their photographer especially what recommendations they have. And from those recommendations, watch the videographer's product and see what moves you, see what you watch and what you can envision being your wedding film.
Right, because, there's a lot of companies out there. There are companies that have teams. There's companies that just have one person, obviously with their assistants. And there's companies that have tons of videographers working for them underneath their umbrella. So there's different types of companies out there. So maybe what you're basically saying is, first and foremost, maybe talk to the people they've already hired and get the referrals from there first. And then they can interview their videographers. So I think what we'll talk about today, which is really important, is more like the mom and pop shops, because that's what you are and that's what you represent. And we could talk about, the importance of having the mom and pop shops, because I'm not going to say anything negative about the big companies out there, because that's right for some people. But at least I know with you, it's you.
Right.
And you're showing up at the job. So I know with us, it's Dan and myself. It's either Dan or me showing up at the job. Now, we have people who work for us. We have editors. We have assistants. But it's us. So if somebody is finding that it's really important to them to be able to connect with the videographer that they're hiring, what is some of the questions that they could be asking when they call you on the phone?
I think something that's really important, like you said, is knowing who's going to show up. When you're going with a smaller company that has, I'd say up to like 5 or 6 people that work for them on a regular basis, you're getting what the product that they're promising you. So having the same people that work for them all the time, it keeps their brand consistent. It keeps their look consistent. You know that you're getting the product that you initially wanted.
How about, too, Crystal, like when you're saying a lot of times people go right on the internet or right on Instagram and they see videos, and you're saying that that's very important for them to see the short clips of the films. But how do they know that that's what they're going to get for their product?
Well, it's interesting you brought that up, actually, because as a videographer, I know that, we're all putting our best work on our website, or sometimes we're putting all of our work on our website just so couples can see different venues and all that. But what's even more important than those highlight films and those reels of your best work is actually seeing a full ceremony or seeing a full day's edit. There's some terms that get thrown around like documentary edit, full-length video.
Can you break those terms down, by the way?
Well, they're different from every studio. It depends what people call them.
Okay.
We call them full-length videos, and what our full-length videos are is basically a live edit of your ceremony and all your reception events.
Okay.
So you're seeing, say if your ceremony was a half an hour long, it's going to be a half an hour long in this video. It's professionally edited. It cuts to different camera angles. We're using professionally mixed audio. And you can see it's like watching a video of your live event. So if there's a company that, they're putting together great highlight reels and you're seeing the best of their work and it's great, but then you ask to see a live edit and it's not good. It's got shaky camera movement. You can't hear the priest talking.
Well, so for starters, then you're saying the first thing you should do is ask to see a full. What's the terminology that you're saying?
A full doc edit or a full-length video.
And then when you see that, you should be looking for shaky cameras,
Yep.
audio.
Not matching footage. Like sometimes the colors might be off if somebody doesn't know how to properly
color balance.
I mean,
I know
that.
But
Right.
For the people who are listening,
oh yeah, they don't.
So basically, what Crystal's saying is just make sure that you're looking for consistency.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's step one, really.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to make sure that someone knows how to properly, someone technically knows what they're doing.
Right.
Because anybody can pick up a camera and learn how to do the trendy camera movements.
And also, too, that for that 30-second clip that you're seeing, you can put together from a
Oh,
whole day's
you could do
worth
it
of
from
footage.
your cell phone, too.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? Anybody can make a cool TikTok video or,
Right.
Drones are kind of affordable now. Somebody can get a drone and get a cool shot of Newport, but that doesn't mean that they know how to properly capture your wedding day.
So step one, look for the full footage.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Ask for an example of a full edit.
And then you just gave them the points of what they have to look for, which is pretty cool. Because I don't think a lot of people understand making sure that you're looking for proper transitions, audio, color balance.
Mm-hmm.
For me, being a photographer, I think it's really important to, yes, the end product you just talked about, but also to how they handle themselves the day of.
Oh, that's super important.
So I would really like to talk about a little bit for our listeners is how can they make sure that they're hiring a professional that's going to handle themselves professionally the day of? Is there any tips and tricks that you can tell them that they can be asking for, or buzzwords that they can be looking for?
Sure. Well, right from the start, like I mentioned earlier, it's important to get recommendations from your other vendors because they wouldn't be recommending this person if they didn't like working with them themselves. The next most important thing is to meet with your videographer beforehand. I mean, whether you're doing it through a video call or in person, you'll get to see their personality firsthand. Do you like spending time with them? Do you think that they're going to get along with your cranky grandmother? Do you think that they'll be able to vibe well with your wedding party?
Yes,
and all that.
So it's really important, I think, for what you're saying, and I agree with you, is that making sure you're talking with a person that's going to be there the day of, or someone who's going to be a big part of the component of your final product the day of.
Absolutely. Yeah, because
Yes.
I realize it's not always, sometimes the owner of the business is who you speak with and who you meet with, and they may have another team there, and that's fine.
Right.
But as long as you have that one-on-one connection with who you're hiring and
Yeah,
you
'cause,
know
like,
what to expect.
For example, for me, it's Dan and myself, and not every couple talks to Dan, but Dan
Right.
and I talk to each other all the time on a continuous basis, and it's us. And what
Yeah.
you see on our website is a collection of our work. But like you said, there's a lot of companies out there that so you looked at their product, right? And now it's like, okay, but how are they going to handle themselves the day of? And it's you want to make sure that it's the same team or the same person is really what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that's important too is making sure that they're invested in you. You don't want to meet with a videographer who's just talking about themselves the whole time, because after all, they're making a product about you and your love story. So I think it's really important that they're asking questions to get to know you, get to know things that you like, get to know your family dynamics. Who are you really close to? Maybe you don't have a great relationship with your mom or dad and you don't want
A ton of
awkward
clips with
footage
them.
with them. You know what I mean?
That's smart because so that happens at the meetings and the talking.
Exactly.
So that's kind of step 2 is like talk to your videographer.
And make sure they want to get to know you.
Yeah, because you know what? It's interesting is that there's so many people at a wedding day then that you're taking clips of. You want to make sure that final product doesn't have a date.
Right.
In it.
Yes,
It
exactly.
has the right person in it.
Yeah.
Or like the maybes and the family.
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's the person that's like really married into the family.
Yeah.
I also think too, getting the recommendations, like you said, is important because you want to make sure that they're a team player and that they are professional at the job. They look professional. They're dressed professional. They handle themselves professionally. They're not in the way too.
Right. That's and as you know, being a photographer, I know you've touched upon it in other episodes before, it's so important that you hire a videographer that gets along well with all of your vendors. Somebody who's willing to help out. Someone who's not thinking they're running the show.
Yeah, you mentioned something about a story you had when you were traveling behind a limo.
Yes.
Do tell.
That was a crazy day. So, oh God, it was probably like
Well, you talked about helping out, so you helped out. So
I helped out. That's true. We all did, actually. It was long story short, we were driving from the location where we were doing their formals to the reception venue. I was riding behind the photographer. The photographer was right behind the limo. Their back tire, popped. I don't know the terminology for that. And it ricocheted into the back window where the bride and groom were sitting in the limo. The window smashed. We all got glass all over our cars. We pulled over on the side of the road. The first thing I did, I popped my head in the window and I was like, "Are you guys okay?" And, we all had to get out. Everyone was fine, thankfully. But, the photographer and I were taking snacks out of our coolers. We're all sitting on the side of the highway, eating pretzels and stuff. And eventually we figured out that they weren't going to have transportation fast enough to get everybody to the venue. So I took some of the bridal party in my car. I'm like, come on, guys. I moved everything out of the way. My car was a mess. And I took, I think, 3 of the groomsmen in my car to the reception. And it's just, you need people that are willing to think on their feet in emergency situations and that are willing to help out.
And that comes with experience.
True. And
Yes.
that also goes back to finding people that have that personality where, someone's going to go with the flow and just do what needs to be done.
And hire team players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important.
How about a little bit about questions that people should be asking their videographers to make sure that they're hiring team players, people who are professional, people who understand everything we're talking about, like color balance and audio, and so the aesthetics, but also too the day of. What are some questions that our listeners can ask?
So talking about the product, I think it's important to, 1, ask to see everything. 2, when they do ask to see that longer edit, ask what it entails. Say this doc edit that you offer, what does that include? What am I receiving in that video? And listen to how they explain that, because they could just be saying it's a video of the day. But if they're explaining that they're color correcting, they're using professionally recorded audio, things like that, those are some words to maybe look for. Another thing is to ask them flat out, how will you work with my photographer? Because some people, they'll openly tell you we work great with them. We reach out to them before the wedding to kind of connect and see what their needs are, see what our needs are, and get an idea on how you're going to work together. But if someone's kind of taken back by that question and they don't know how to respond, that might mean that they're not going to work well with your photographer.
Yeah, so it's basically, it goes back down to what you originally said, is just really speaking to them and listening and seeing if they're listening to you.
Yes. It's very important.
And also, too, you know, being like a mom and pop shop like yourself, they know that they're getting you who's coming out or your team. Mm-hmm. But some of these other companies, you don't know who's showing up. So how can they really speak for what those people are going to be doing at the day of? So again, going back to vendor referrals, because certain vendors have seen these people on site and know how they handle themselves. You know, touching upon a little bit about what you were just talking about with the photographer versus videographer, I can speak a little bit on that terms of the photographer side. It's very important. So for the listeners out there, to make sure that your videographer and your photographer work well together. Does not mean they have to be one of the same companies.
Oh, yeah.
I do believe that, you know, you can't be a jack of all trades. So, you know, you'll have companies that specialize in videography and you'll have companies that specialize in photography, but they have to work well together. A lot of times it's because they can get each other's shots.
Yeah.
So, Crystal, I want to talk a little bit about coming from a photographer and working with a videographer. You talk about reaching out to your photographer and getting referrals. I think it's so important. I mean, look, I've been doing this long enough that I can work well with anybody, but I want to tell a little story. I don't want to talk negative, but there is a reality to this story. I recently worked with a company, and it was really testing my patience because one of the things Dan and I thrive on is getting to know the couple, understanding them, and reading their body language, and also understanding, you know, just what they want from their day. And there is a point when there's lens exhaustion is a word? Lens?
Exhaustion?
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
So, look, you know, as a wedding photographer, we want to get the best stuff. Just like, you know, you want to get the best film footage. But you got to understand to read people and know when they're done. So this particular videographer, they just kept pushing them. And a lot of times, you know, you're chasing after the same footage. So a videographer and a photographer should be able to work simultaneously together. Obviously, the photographer wants some time and the videographer wants some time. And every time I gave them time to work with their couples, I felt like they were pushing the couples too much. Does that make sense?
Like they were done.
They were done.
Yeah.
And it was almost to the point where I felt like they needed to start just working together with me and getting the same footage at the same time because they were losing their threshold.
Right.
So there was actually one point where Dan and I were done. We said, okay, we got what we needed. And then the videographer said, okay, well, a little bit more. And they kept going and kept going and kept going. And I could just see the couple on their face. They were done.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really important that the listeners do understand that talking with your videographer and making sure that your videographer understands what you're looking for in the end product and making sure that they can work well with a photographer goes a long way on the day of.
And like what you said too, it's really important that not only your photographer but your videographer as well, like we've been saying the whole time, gets to know you. Because in that circumstance, if the videographer had known them better, they'd see the look on their faces. They'd know, like you said, reading body language. That's important because I know for us in our films, we want our couples to look as candid as possible. We don't want them to look posed. We don't want them to look uncomfortable, number one. And when someone's done being photographed or filmed, you can tell. You can see it in their face. Like, you're not going to use a shot where they just don't look like they're feeling it.
Right. And also, too, if you spent time with them, maybe, like you said, over the phone or in person or Zoom calls, you can start to also know and understand what's important to them, and you can read them a little bit better than if it's just someone that just shows up at their wedding day.
Right. Just trying to get those epic shots.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. It's like there's a point when – so we talked earlier a little bit about seeing the highlights and like on Instagram or on the website, and then you want to see the whole you want to see a whole footage too. But there's also the day of. It's like you can see all these epic shots, but how are they handling themselves the day of? And that becomes what's really important with the personal referrals.
Absolutely.
To making sure that these people are handling themselves appropriately, professionally on the day of your wedding and understanding how to read you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Crystal, there's a lot of trends that I'm seeing out there with videography. Just like photography, trends come and go. And I'm seeing a ton of trends coming in and coming out. I do want you to speak a little bit about the trends that you're seeing. If you could, let us know a little bit about some tips and tricks on the trends that you're seeing.
Sure. I know one thing that's been really big for the past few years now is drone footage. It looks amazing. It's beautiful. I think, an important part to the video to really set the scene and the location. The other thing I'm noticing is that people are more into eye candy now. They want a cool video that's cut real fast that, they can put on their Instagram and people will watch and be like, wow, that's such a neat video. And I think that's great. But it comes down to what we were saying before, is finding the right videographer for you. You want to make sure that it's the style you want. Trends are great. If you want something trendy, that's fine. But in the end, I think you still want to make sure your video is being captured properly. It's your wedding day, after all. Like, these cool shots look great. It's nice to have eye candy. But you want to make sure that if you are hiring someone that's a trendy videographer, you want to make sure that they're still capturing those special moments between you and your family.
So how can they make sure that they do capture that?
I think it comes down to, again, just having realistic expectations, watching their work, knowing what to expect.
So not just watching that quick little clips that they're putting out.
Exactly. You want to see the longer edits. You want to see the bulk of the footage they're capturing, not just a 60-second video on Instagram.
Have you ever had anybody ask you for referrals?
For referrals for other vendors?
No, for like referrals. They want to hear from your past clients.
Oh, it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, it doesn't happen with me often, but I wonder why.
I know. I kind of wish people were more comfortable doing that, because I think that's the best way to figure out what kind of experience you're going to have, is to hear it from another couple as well.
Yeah, because then they can ask the couple those questions and see if it's right for them. I wonder why we don't get that answer.
Yeah.
That question a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I do think that the question we should be asking is, I think a videographer should be asked if they get along with their photographer, and the photographer should be asked if they work with the videographer, because, again, we're chasing the same angles.
It's really important.
So you talk about kind of the eye candy. When you say eye candy, you explain a little bit about what you mean by that, by what they're going after, but what they might be missing maybe.
I didn't even think of it that way. I guess that's a really good point. So, I mean, like I said, every company is going to handle things differently. I know one thing that we do personally is we're going to shoot pretty shots of your decor, your flowers, the reception setup, the ceremony setup, your dress. But I'm not going to spend 20 minutes while you're getting ready trying to get an epic dress shot when I could be getting real special moments of you laughing with your wedding party, maybe having special moments with your parents or your siblings. That kind of stuff, to me, is what makes a wedding video something that's going to be more personal and something that you're going to love 10, 15, 20 years from now. Those eye candy shots are great, and it's nice to have a trendy video, but I think that what's important is what you're going to like years into your life, what your children are going to enjoy watching.
Right, and that comes back down to just speaking and getting to know the videographer and speaking to the person that's going to be either on site or controlling the editing.
Right.
Because then they can make sure that that's right for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of like you said, a lot of times you think you want that great footage and that great clip, but sometimes it's the people is what you're trying to say. How about the fact that should they inform their bridal party and the immediate family that a videographer is going to be there, and how can they help prep those people for their video footage outcome?
Oh, that's an excellent point. We always tell our couples, just to let, like, the VIP, we call them, like the wedding party, your family, any, like, the closest people to you on the wedding day. It's great for them to know that there's going to be a videographer there, just so that they don't think that they're in the way. There's a lot of times, especially since our style and the way we shoot is much more candid, we don't like to do a lot of pose shots. A lot of times we might be like shooting over someone's shoulder. We might be getting a nice shot of, say, a bride or groom's mom, like, looking over as they're getting ready. And we don't want mom to, like, look at us and be like, oh, God, am I in the way? It's nice if they know that we're going to be there, they ignore us, and that way we can just kind of catch things candidly. I definitely think that helps to let people know that there's going to be a videographer there.
So, Crystal, what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I would really like for you to get into what our listeners should be saying and asking when they're first initially speaking to videographers about making sure that they're hiring the right one for them.
Okay.
Cool. We'll be right back.
Awesome.
I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode. All right, well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. So right before the break, we were talking with Crystal about the importance of making sure that they hire the right videographer, and we talked a little bit about why you got to get referrals or see final product and full-length product. But now let's talk a little bit about, Crystal, like what are the questions that the couple should be asking their videographer to make sure it's right for them?
I think first and foremost, when you're talking to a videographer, you should ask them for examples of everything you're receiving in your package. So if you're going to be getting a doc edit, ask to see the entire thing.
So, Crystal, why is that important for them to see it all?
I think that's something that couples don't realize is that what's great about having a videographer is the audio. It's the sound from the day. It's the one thing that you can't capture from photos. And by seeing a full doc edit, you'll really get an idea on how well they're capturing sound. For example, if you're having an outdoor ceremony, you're going to want to see another outdoor ceremony. Is the videographer using a windscreen on their mics? Are you hearing wind in the background? Are you hearing the ocean or seagulls? If somebody is properly recording audio, it's going to sound like a professional product. And like I said, that's something that you can't get back.
Absolutely. So what's another questions that they could be asking the videographer to make sure it's right for them?
Another thing that's really important that we've touched on a lot in this episode is, do you have issues working with a photographer or other vendors? I think that's a really important question that they should be asking.
So what is the question? How do they work well with the photographer and the other vendors?
Yeah, I would just straight out ask, say like, oh, how do you work with photographers? What's your process?
That's a great question.
Another thing that they could ask is, oh, do you talk to other vendors before the wedding day? Like, will you talk to my planner? Will you talk to my DJ? Will you talk to the photographer? Just to make sure everyone's on the same page and that they have the same goal.
Right. And also, too, maybe it's important that they ask about how can they personalize their film.
That's a great question. I would definitely ask, how are you going to personalize this experience for us?
So how do you personalize it for them?
One thing that we do, aside from meeting with our couples beforehand, we have a couple of different questionnaires that we send out. They're all before the wedding day. One of them is just, basic timeline questions. But also in there's a lot of little things to get to know what's important to them. It's easy to ask like, oh, what special items are you going to have on the wedding day? But why? Is this jewelry something that your mom gave to you? Or maybe there's going to be a gift presented to your parents that's really important. There's certain things that kind of personalize it a little bit more. One thing that I'm not sure if every company does it, but we actually send out what we call our music and editing questionnaire. It's kind of for like an after the wedding thing right before we get editing. It's this whole questionnaire really to understand what type of music they like, what type of music they don't like. We do give our couples the opportunity to choose the music for their film, or they can let us choose. It's up to them.
That's actually great to know, because that could be a question that they're asking. Do we have basically you want to make sure that you have an insight of what type of music or making sure that your videographer knows who's important to how you edit and what's important.
That's another thing in our editing questionnaire that's always the first thing I go to before I start editing. We actually have a question in there. Are there any moments from your wedding day that you can remember that you can't wait to see, that are super important to you, or maybe something you don't want to see? Maybe, a date to one of your guests was really drunk and dancing all crazy on the dance floor, or maybe one of your family members got into an argument or something, or there's just someone there that you had a falling out with and that you don't want to see in the video. These are things we ask, and we ask to see pictures of these people so we know not to include them.
That's so interesting. So a little takeaway tip for the listeners is asking the videographer if they do that, and it's really interesting that you do it after the wedding.
Oh, yeah, because otherwise, they don't know what's going to happen before.
That's so interesting. See, there's a great little nugget and takeaway.
Lots of little nuggets.
So, Crystal, for our wrap-up question, we talked a little bit about what the couple should be asking the videographer. But what should the videographer be asking the couple to make sure that they are the professional and the right fit for them?
That's a really good question. I think it's important, like I think we had mentioned it a little bit before, just to make sure that your videographer is invested in you. You want to make sure that they're asking questions about your day, about your life together, maybe how you met, kind of what your dating was like, asking about family dynamics, maybe just important details about the wedding day that they're really excited about. I think if your videographer is not asking those personalized questions about you, you're not going to get a very personalized film.
So they should be asking, number one, a lot of personalized questions about you as a couple. And you should be willing to share that with your videographer.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if that's important to you to have a wedding. I mean, in a way, wedding films are kind of like your love story. It's kind of, you're capturing so many moments that go into the day, like the toasts, things that your officiant are saying, maybe some readings. All those things are personal to you. You're picking them out because it has to do with your story. You want to make sure that those things are included in your film. And then the second thing, something that people may not think of, is to make sure that they have backup on the wedding day. Not just backup personnel, but backup equipment, especially since the start of the pandemic. I know something that many wedding vendors have ran into is, having to get last minute coverage because of COVID exposure, or maybe, your vendor ends up with COVID. You want to know what's going to happen in that circumstance and make sure that somebody is going to show up on your wedding day that is not just a random fill-in, someone that has a similar style to them, so that you still get the product that you were promised.
That's a great point. And what's your final question that the videographer should be asking the couples?
The third thing your videographer should be mentioning is what your expectations should be. Who to expect on your wedding day. They should be talking about their team, who works for them, who's going to be showing up, maybe who's editing the wedding.
Yeah, that's really important, especially if you're trying to make sure you get a personalized connection. So the videographer, for our listeners, should be explaining to them who their team is and what to expect on their wedding day.
Absolutely.
I think you gave our listeners a ton of information and a ton of takeaway points. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped our listeners become one step closer to their journey of a stress-free wedding planning. Can you tell everybody where they can find you, Crystal?
Sure. We're actually not really that active on our Facebook. I would say to go to our Instagram. It's at Annear Wedding Films. And also on our website, that's the best way to get in touch with us, to go on our contact form on our website.
Awesome. And then for our listeners, we'll have all your information and our episode notes that you can find on our blog and our website page, which is sarahzarella.com/podcast. So, Crystal, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun catching up.
Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes, along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support, and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.